How do you get that perfect and polished edge? Whether it's a blanket, sweater, baby clothes, the right border makes all the difference. Here are 4 easy edging and border stitches. Everything you knit needs a defined border. Whether it's a sweater, mittens, anything, they all have to have an edge, because if you just start straight off doing stocking stitch, the edge will just curl up and you won't have a proper edge to your knitting that looks good. This is the simplest edge that you could possibly do. It's good for blankets in particular. You could put it around the bottom of sweaters. So I'm just going to cast a few stitches on here, and then I'll show you the edge that is just a plain garter stitch edge. That means that every row you do is just plain knit. And for this, I'm just doing a 1 needle cast on. So I'm just putting the wool around my finger and doing a purl stitch to put it on there. Now I'm just going to go ahead and knit this first row. First row is always just a little bit fiddly, but once you get that one done, it's straight sailing. And as I say, you just do every row a knit. So I'm not really going to just knit this on camera. This is the basic knit stitch that I'm doing, and you'll just repeat it row after row. So I'll just do a few rows and then I'll show you what it looks like. So that's what that little edge would look like. And you would just make that as wide as you want to, and it just makes a nice little border. And so what's particularly good about garter stitch is if you were knitting something like a blanket, you could continue this up the sides to make a matching edging. The garter stitch is continuing up the sides and it just gives a nice finish to it. As I say, this is great for blankets. This is moss stitch. It's a knit 1, purl 1. It's a little bit slow to do because of all the wool moving around. So to put my wool to the front, do a purl. Put it to the back, do a knit. To the front, do a purl. Now it's a little confusing because if you do a knit 1, purl 1 rib, you're also doing knit 1, purl 1. But it's just a matter of where you're arranging the stitches. So on this piece of work, I don't want it to look like the rib stitch. When I get to the end of my work here, you'll see what I mean. I've just done a knit, so I'm going to do a purl, a knit, and then a purl. Now because I ended with a purl, I'm going to start with a purl. That's really the only rule that you've got to remember. So if I start with a purl now, it'll be moss stitch. If I'd have started with a knit stitch, I would then get the rib stitch. So every time you get to the end of the row, whatever stitch you did, do the same stitch for the beginning of the row. This makes a nice edge. It's a kind of a bumpy looking edge. It's more like garter stitch in a way. In the way it looks, it's a little bit different, but also in the way it feels. You can feel the texture of it. It's a nice on the edge of blankets, things like that. I'll do a few more rows to show you, and then you'll be able to see what it looks like. Because this is another one that I would often use on blankets, I will just do a few stitches at the edge and just a stocking stitch in the middle so that you can see what that effect would be if you used it in that way. So there's the moss stitch edging finished, and you can see what a nice finish that makes for something like a blanket. And this is what it would look like up the sides if you wanted to use it as a border all the way around. It looks really nice. This is not the kind of edge that you would use on something like a bobble hat or a pair of mittens, something where you would need that kind of more elasticy finish to help them stay in place. But for something like a blanket, or perhaps a baby jacket with a square edge around the bottom, it's really a nice looking little pattern, easy to do. This edge is a really popular and common one. It's just what's called a rib edge. This one is knit 2, purl 2. You can get knit 1 and purl 1. I'm just going to go along and show you the rest of this row so you see how to do it. So you purl 2 stitches, put your wool to the other side of the work, knit 2 stitches. Wool back to the front, purl 2 stitches. Wool to the back, knit 2 stitches. You can see there what that looks like. It's a little stretchy. It's good for the edge of cardigans or sleeves or something. But one little different way that you can do this is to put a little twist. And you can do this any pattern you do. If you're knitting a cardigan and all it says is knit 2, purl 2, rib, you can just put this little pattern in it to make it a little bit fancier. So the way that you do this is start off doing your knit 2, purl 2 as normal. Now when you get to this next knit 2, I'm going to put my needle through the second of the stitches and knit it, and then into the first of the stitches and knit it. Take them both off the needle. Purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. Okay, and again into the second stitch. And you'll notice if I was going into the first stitch, my needle would go behind this needle, but because this is in the way, it can't. So my needle has to come actually to the front of this needle. Around, through, and then of course you're not taking that stitch off. Then into the first stitch, and then take both off. Miss that knit pair. Okay, and then one more time in this last set, knit into the second stitch, leave it on the needle, knit into the first stitch, take both off the needle. Now you've done this on the right side row, so when you see the garment at the end, that'll be the side that you see. So now you're going to do the wrong side row. This one you're just going to do your regular knit 2, purl 2, just as you would for all of your other patterns. So I'm just going to go off camera and knit this row. Do you see what that looks like? Now on the next row, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that stitch on the alternative. So you see I left this one plain and this one plain, so this time I'm going to do the twist on that row. Then I'm going to purl 2, knit 2, because I'm not going to repeat that twist on this 2 knit set, purl 2, and now I'm going to do the twist in the next one. So what I'm going to do on this row though is I'm going to show you a different way of doing that same twist. And that's by using a cable needle. If you've ever used one of these, it's a very short needle that's pointed at both ends. And so the way I would use this is I would slip that stitch onto that cable needle and put it at the back. Just hold it, knit that stitch, put the cable needle back where I can get to it and knit that stitch. And that gives exactly the same effect as doing that other twisted stitch. So we get to the next one I want to twist and I'll show you that again. So I'm going to slide that onto the cable needle and put it at the back. And if you see, I'm actually holding onto that needle. I've got it trapped in my hand at the back. You can actually get new cable needles now that are better than this, and they actually have a shape so that in the middle there's like a U and they don't fall out as easily. If you don't hold on to this one, it might fall out of your work. So whichever way is easier for you to do works to get this little pattern. I think both are quite easy. So slide it onto the needle, into the back and hold it, knit that stitch, cable needle back where you can get it, knit that stitch. And there's no more on this row. That's the right side row again. Now I'm going to do the wrong side row. And again, this is just knit 2, purl 2 all the way along. Now, when you knit the back, there's absolutely no difference at all. It really is just a straight knit 2, purl 2. And this is the back you're looking at now. And as you can see, you really can't see that you've done anything very different. If I look really closely, I can actually see that something is going on there, but really it's very difficult to tell. On the front, you've got this alternating twist going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple more rows so you see a better effect, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So I did a few rows there, and then I just did some stocking stitch to take it away from the rib. Do you see that little twist in there you've done? It does look a little bit like a little cabling, doesn't it? You can see at the beginning here that I didn't start the twist straight away, and normally if I was doing this on a garment I was making, I would start the twist straight away. But in this case, I wanted to show the difference, what the regular just knit 2, purl 2 looked like. I've just put it on the edge of my sewing machine there to see if you can see that better. So I think that's really a pretty edge. I quite often do that if I'm knitting something. I'd rather see that on the bottom of a sleeve than just a plain one. And if I turn it over, that's pretty much what a plain one would look like. You can barely tell that I've done that twist on the other side. So that's another little way you can do an edge. So this is not that great for example, blankets, because of that little elasticity there. But, you know, anything else that you're doing, you know, it's particularly good for sleeves and things like that. Anything where you would have where you would want a little bit of elasticity around the edges. So keep watching, I have one more to show you. For this little Picot Edge, I'm going to cast on about 30 stitches for this little sampler. And I'm actually using the double needle method of casting on at this time. And that's because I think it is a little bit looser, of a looser cast on stitch. Whatever cast on stitch you do, just make sure that you do it a little bit loosely, because when we do a few more rows, you will be knitting into this cast on edge. So you want to be able to get your needle into the little loops that you're making. So as you're casting on, just bear that in mind, and a little looser than you would be in normal casting on. So I'll just go ahead and finish this and put 30 stitches on my needle. And then we'll go on to the next step. I'm going to just knit the first row. Okay, turn it around, and the next row is going to be purl. So I'm setting off as though this is going to be stocking stitch. Now the next row, you're on the knit side now. This is actually going to be your pattern row. I have to put a little bit of extra footage in here. It's hard to stay on camera doing this because you move the needles so much. So it's yarn forward, knit 2 together, which you do by putting your needle into both of these 2 stitches at the same time, and then just knitting them as normal. Okay, so yarn forward, put your needle through the fronts of both of these 2 stitches at the same time, knit it as normal. Now at the end of this, your stitches will be the same, because your yarn forward is making a stitch and your knit 2 together is taking a stitch away. And I'm not sure whether you can see where it's starting to make holes along there, but this is what's going to make your picot edge when you finish doing it. So I'm just going to do that all the way along to the end of the row. Hopefully that's all in camera this time where you can see it. The next row is just going to be another purl row. Might seem a little odd if you've not knit these knit two together and yarn forwards before. The stitches feel and look a bit different too when you're just doing a plain stocking stitch. But you can see there where the pattern is forming now. So I'm just going to do this all the way to the end. You see that? And now the next two rows are just going to be one more knit row and one more purl row. And then I'll show you what turns this into the picot edge. Alright, so I've done that other knit and other purl row. So this is what it looks like now. And so what you're going to do now is you're going to fold this part up one by one. And to secure it, you're actually going to knit into your cast on edge. So can you see that the cast on edge stitches, they're quite, move my hands out of the way, they're quite clearly defined there. And each time you do a stitch, you're also going to take a stitch from this cast on bottom. Into there, into the next stitch along on the cast on edge. Knit through both, pull it off. So again, I have a little extra footage here to try and show this a bit more clearly. So I'm putting my needle into this stitch, and then I'm taking the next stitch from the cast on row, which you can see quite clearly there is that stitch. And then just knit both stitches as normal. So from there, the one from the cast on edge. And if you can't tell which is the next stitch, if you just pull on this a little bit, you can see which loop it goes through. So it's going through that one, so I'm going to go into that one. To make sure you get it through that bottom loop though. This really is not hard, it is just a little bit fiddly. But when you're doing it for yourself, you know, you can see better than trying to see it on camera, and it's really not difficult. So you just continue all the way along until that's all done. On the back, you really can't tell that you're doing anything. So just looks like a regular purl row. Jess, I just got my wool attacked by my cat. No. I've done that last row, and can you see how cute that edge is? It looks really pretty, but it is kind of fiddly. But there is something else you can do if you find that edge too fiddly for you, and that is finish it in the same way as you would if you were actually using this edge as your ending edge. I'm just going to knit a few rows and I'll show you what I mean. You can see here, if this is too fiddly for you, then what I've done here is I've just taken that row out so I can show you another option that you can do to finish this Picot Edge. So at the moment, all I'm doing is I'm just going to knit this a bit longer. So off camera, I'm just going to keep on knitting this. And this is just so I can get enough width on here to show you what the next step would be if this is what you was going to do. So you can see I just knitted a few more rows just to give myself some space to work here. And so if you can't do it the other way, if it's just too fiddly, what you can do is thread some wool onto a needle, and I'm just using the leftover from what was cast on here, and then just fold this up, and you can see quite easily where it folds to make this edge, and then you're just going to sew it to the row underneath. And you would think, wouldn't you, that you'd have to be really careful about getting the line straight and everything, but it just automatically folds into the right place, so you don't have to worry about it. So you would just go all the way along like that, and the result would be the same little edge there. And you can tell the stitching doesn't show on the front because you're just going through the loops on the back. If you had started at the bottom and you were knitting up on a jacket and were about to cast off at the top, you wanted to make this Picot edge, then you would do it in just the same way, and this sewing would be the way that you would finish it there, because you can't really do it any other way. So which one would you try first? Let me know in the comments.